It looks good. Looks like I'm live. Welcome. Hey, everyone. Welcome to my show. I've been offline for quite some time, but now I'm back and I'm starting a new series building on AWS. So if this is for you, you're in the right place. Now, let me check real quick if I'm streaming on all the channels. I'm going to have a look at Twitch. Looks like I'm running. And maybe in the chat, can you let me know? Can you let me know if you can hear me just real quick? Because I've set up a couple of new things and changed things around. I'm not entirely sure if you can hear me, so it would be awesome if you could just real quick let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Let me have a look at YouTube. So I'm running the YouTube. I'm unmuting myself. Yeah, I can hear myself, so you should be able to hear me too. Same on LinkedIn, which is awesome. So I can't close that. I can't close that. I'm going back to this. Hey, Bruce. Hey, thanks. Thanks for the feedback on YouTube. All is good. Thanks, Bruce Melvin. Here you go. Cool. All right. Now, the other one thing that I wanted to do before I start really is check out Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Here we go. I'm just going to post that we're alive now on Facebook, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn. Here we go. All right, cool. So I think we're online. As I said, welcome. I'm Dennis. I'm a developer advocate with Amazon Web Services. And what I'm going to do in this series, I'm starting this today. What I'm going to do in this series is really build a small application, but trying to use all the serverless, and not all of them, but trying to use serverless services, just to really try and understand how an event-based serverless application would work. And what I'm going to use are services like AWS Lambda, AWS Step Functions. I'm going to use Amazon DynamoDB. I will use things like Event Bridge to handle events and trigger processes and functions. But I'm also going to use Cloud9 as a development environment. Amazon Cloud9 is the cloud-based IDE. And I'm going to use CDK, the AWS Cloud Development Kit, to implement everything as code. However, hey, Pubudu, hey, nice to see you. Thanks for joining. However, I'm not going to start with the CDK up front. What I'd like to do first is just really quick go through what I'm trying to build, just step by step. And what I'm trying to do for that now is the following. Let me pull up my screen. Here we go. So now you can see my screen. And what I'm trying to do is I've got this tablet here with a pen. So let me see if I can paint on that. I think I'm on the wrong screen. Let me see. Here we go. Ha, look at that. It works. Okay, can I remove it? Good. So, hello. Oh, I need to practice that. Hello, stream. There we go. All right. Okay, cool. I can delete everything. Typing command control U. No. Okay. Here we go. Okay, I'm using this for the first time. It's going to be a lot of practice, but it's also going to be fun. So what I'm going to do now, let me switch to black screen real quick. So what I want to do first is I want to have an S3 bucket. Yes, that's going to be an S3 bucket. And what I'm going to do with the bucket, I'll put files into the bucket. And whenever I upload a file to the bucket, what I then want to do is basically trigger an event. And this event will then trigger a step functions state machine. So that's what I'm trying to do first. This state machine will be something that then triggers a Lambda function. and that may do various things. And at some point in time, everything will come together in the end. So what I advise you to do really is, if you build an event-driven application, to really not only use Lambda functions, but really use step functions to orchestrate your Lambda functions. Even if in the beginning you only have one function, it still makes sense to set up a step functions process up front so that it's easy then to add additional functionality to build it out. It's easier to do it this way than to first do it via a Lambda function and then have to refactor it into a step function. And this is really easy with AWS, and I'm going to show you in this series, I'm going to show you how this can be done. Hey, Ahmed, good to see you. Thanks for joining the show. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'll just real quick go through the whole thing in the console. So I'm going to build this in the console. And once I've done that, I'm going to rebuild it using the AWS CDK so that we have it as infrastructure as code. But first of all, I'm just going to build a real quick prototype building the whole thing in the console. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know in the chat. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, I think there's no way on LinkedIn to join the chat. What you can do is join the YouTube channel. I posted a link to this YouTube channel in the LinkedIn post. So if you want to join from here, you can join the chat. Hey, Koya Mel, sending love from the Philippines. Hi there. Much love back to the Philippines. Thanks for joining. All right, let's start. What I'm going to do now real quick is I'm in the console, and I'm going to pull that up a little larger here. So what I want to do first is, as I said before, I want to have an S3 bucket, right? So let's remove that. So I'll go to S3. I'm just real quick, I'm going to remove the bookmarks here. They're just distracting. Here we go. All right. Okay, cool. So I'm going to S3, to the S3 dashboard. And as you can see, the only thing I have here is a CloudTrail bucket. That is just for logs, audit logs. So whenever something happens in my account, it's being logged into this account, into this bucket, just to make sure that I'm able to really reconstruct after the fact what happened in my account. That is just the best practice, to have CloudTrail running and to log your CloudTrail data into the bucket. And we will look at CloudTrail doing this today. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just create a bucket. I will call it my files. And since this is S3, this needs to be unique, needs to be globally unique. So I'm going to just use my name. Maybe that helps. I'm going to use it in Frankfurt. I'm going to do everything from Frankfurt because I'm based in Germany. So that's the region closest to me. Some additional configuration, I'm going to block all public access. So the bucket is private. I don't want anybody outside, anybody from the internet, to be able to access this bucket. This is private and secure to me. I'm not going to enable bucket versioning. I'm going to encrypt all the data in the bucket just by default using the Amazon S3 key. That's very simple. I don't have anything else to set up here. Let's have a look at advanced settings real quick. Object lock. Object lock would mean that the objects can't be deleted anymore. I don't want that. I want to be able to delete everything afterwards. So I'll just use the default here and create the bucket. So right here, we have this S3 bucket. And the next thing that I wanted to do is, let's see, we wanted to have our bucket. That's not a nice bucket. Anyway, what I want to do is whenever some file gets stored inside the bucket, I want to automatically trigger an event. And this event then should do something. So whenever there's a new file, I want to automatically process the file. So there are two ways to do this. The first is really easy. In here in the S3 console, when you look at your bucket, you have properties, and underneath properties, all the way down, you have event notifications. That's what I'm looking at. You have event notifications. And I can create a new event notification. Let's say new file. Scroll down. I want to look at all object create events. So whenever a file is being put, posted, copied, or we have a multi-part upload, in that case, I want to trigger an event. And the thing here is we've got three possible destinations. One being a Lambda function, one being an SNS topic, which is simple notification service, and one being the SQS queue, which is the simple queue service. The thing here is, if we go back to my drawing from, I've deleted it. If we go back to my drawing from before, we have the bucket, we have the event, but what we wanted to do is trigger a step function. We didn't just want to trigger a Lambda function, we wanted to trigger a whole process. And this is something that can't be done from here. What we would have to do in this case would create a Lambda function that then triggers the step function. And this wouldn't make any sense. Well, it could make sense, but in this case, it wouldn't make any sense at all. I would like to directly trigger a step function. And to do that, we do something else. So I'm going to click on cancel. We're not going to use this functionality. What I'm going to use is AWS CloudTrail data events. And just real quick, AWS CloudTrail is a service that logs all the API calls inside of your account. So whenever you do something in the account, AWS CloudTrail logs this, writes this to an audit log. And what you can do is you use these events that are being logged by CloudTrail, use these events to then trigger an action. So we have an event-based architecture where something happens. So the put object API is called on the bucket. Something is stored in the bucket. That leads to an event. And this event can then be used to trigger a function. Let's have a look at that. I'm going to click on Configure and CloudTrail and open this in a new window. So as you can see here, this is the CloudTrail dashboard. And you can also see I already have, and this is by default, I already have a trail because everything that happens in this account, I want to have a log. I want to know what happens. So this is why I have a do not delete here. I don't want to delete this. What this trail does is it takes all the events that happen in my account, all the API calls that happens in my account, and stores them in this S3 bucket. The one that you just saw, this is the back to S3, that is this bucket. So this trail stores all events in this bucket. Of course, I could listen to this specific CloudTrail to listen to events that apply to my application. But what I'd rather do here is create a specific trail for my application. Not use the default trail that I'm using anyway, but create a specific trail. I'm going to do that by clicking on Create Trail. And I will call that my application trail. Now I want to store that in a new S3 bucket. I don't want to store it in the existing bucket. I want to use the existing bucket. And if anything happens in this bucket, I want the events to be stored in a new bucket. And I'm just going to call that AWS CloudTrail application log. I want to enable KMS encryption. Or rather, I won't enable encryption right here. I'll just leave it at that as that. I don't need log file validation because this really is just for application integration. I don't need CloudWatch logs, and I'm going to next. And now the important thing here is, what do I want to log? There are 3 types of events in AWS. One being management events. This is whenever I create a bucket, or I create a DynamoDB table, or I run a Lambda function. No, that is not. Running a Lambda function is not a management event. I'm sorry. Whenever I start a VM and EC2 instance, that would be a management event. And then there are data events. And data events are whenever a Lambda function is being executed, whenever something is stored in an S3 bucket, and so forth. And then we also have insight events. This is for monitoring and observability. We don't need insight events. And for the application integration, we also don't need management events. All we want to use really is data events. So we're only interested in if a file is being stored in our S3 object. And now I'm going down to the data events field, and the event source is supposed to be S3. I'm not interested in read events. I only want to know when something is written into the bucket. And over here, I can choose the bucket that I want to monitor. And I'm choosing this one. I simply say choose. I'm not interested in read events. I'm only interested in write events in this bucket, in nothing else. So this trail will only log write requests to this bucket. I click on next, review the details. Let's check if everything's correct. Management events are not configured for this trail. We don't have anything from all buckets. The only thing we do is we use my files, the bucket, and write events are enabled. I'll click on event trail. And now, as you can see down here, we have this my application trail, and it is already logging. If I reload this, you can see it automatically created this S3 bucket. So this is where my application logs will go to. And you can see it's already starting to write. We don't have any events yet because nothing happened inside the bucket that we're monitoring. Does that make sense? Please let me know in the chat if I'm losing you, if I'm too quick, if anything is unclear. Please, just post in the chat if there's anything that you would like to know. So what do we have now? We have the bucket, and we have whenever something new. Oh, well, let's remove that real quick. Whenever something writes into the bucket, the event is stored in the log, right? That's what we do. And the next thing we want to do is to react to this event whenever it happens to do something. So this is CloudTrail. This is S3, the simple storage service. And to do something, we need a service that makes sure that something is being done. We need a service that picks up this event. So what we use here is Event Bridge. Because all CloudTrail events are automatically being posted to Event Bridge. And that's what I'm going to set up next. So let's go. I'm opening a new console, and I'm going to Event Bridge. Here we go. Amazon Event Bridge. And in Amazon Event Bridge, I have event buses. Right now, I only have the default bus. And I'm also only interested in the default bus because all CloudTrail events will automatically be posted to the default bus. What I can do now is set up a rule, a listener on top of this event bus. Hey, Shadi, thanks for joining. Yes, it has been some real quick. It has been some time. I was pretty busy, and but I'm back now, and I'm going to stream this new series where I'm walking through building an application on AWS using serverless services and also the AWS CDK, and I'm going to program all of that in Python. There's a question here by Kasukur. How can we create a bus with replay for, say, X number of days? So Event Bridge doesn't do replay. Event Bridge only basically is a bus whenever an event is being put on the bus, it is delivered to all the listeners. And listening is implemented via event rules. I'm going to show you how that works in just a minute. So if you want to replay events, you would have to replay the log. But since we are storing the log in this bucket, you can take these files and just replay them by putting them on a bus again. That would be a way to do a replay. Just take the log files and put them on a bus again. I would not use the default bus for that because that could confuse then other services. But I think that's a detailed discussion. What you can do is really just use the logs because they're stored in JSON, and I'm gonna show you what they look like real quick. These events. I just created this trail, and this is the event. And this is what they look like. This is an event where I created the trail. So we have the assumed role, who am I? So it's me, it's Dennis. Then we have the actual event name, create trail. We have the region, we have the source IP address. This happens to be mine just now. We have the bucket name that's affected. We have a couple of things, and this is how what all the events look like. And you can basically take the log files and basically put all the logs on the bus again, and this is how you would replay. Hey, Saja, good to see you. Yes, I'm not running the quizzes right now. Actually, I'm still pretty busy because we're running up to reInvent. reInvent's going to happen in the end of this month, from November 29th to December 2nd. So there's still a lot of work for me to do regarding reInvent, but I still wanted to try to come online just a couple of times, and this is why I started this series. I don't have much time to prepare anything, so what I'm going to do here is just off the cuff do some building and learning along the way. Kazukur, your question, how about archives? I'm not entirely sure what you mean with that question. Maybe you can rephrase, elaborate, and I'm going to make sure to answer the question if I can. So while you do that, I'll go back to Event Bridge. I've got this default event bus, and now what I can do is I can create an event rule. And an event rule, and I'll go back here real quick, an event rule is basically, it looks at the event bus. Oh, that's not pretty. It looks at the event bus, and every event that goes through the bus, it checks every event that goes through the bus and checks if the event matches the pattern of the rule. And if it matches the pattern of the rule, it sends the event to a target. So that's how event rules work. I'm going to set one up. I'll create a rule. I'll just call it new file in application bucket. Just call it like that. I don't need a description now. And what I want to do here is I want to define an event pattern. I could also just schedule events. That's like a cron job to say, please fire this event every hour or every minute or every day. What I want to do is use an actual event pattern. I'm going to click here. And now I can define my pattern. And what I want to do is I want, whenever something is stored in the S3 bucket, that is the event that I'm listening for. So I'm looking at the event pattern now. Let's say predefined pattern by service. The service provider will be AWS. So you can also look at services from service partners or anything else. I'm looking at AWS. The specific service name that I'm looking for is S3, the simple storage service. Make sure not to use S3 on Outposts. I don't have an Outpost anywhere. Use S3. And then I'm going to look at the event types. I could just use all events. I could use bucket level operations or object level operations. And what we're looking at really is object level operations. What I want is specifically if we have a put object event. So whenever somebody puts a new object into the bucket, I want this event rule to be triggered. So just real quick, we have an event pattern, predefined pattern by service. The service provider is AWS. We're using simple storage service as the source of the event. We're looking at object level operations, and the specific operation that we're looking at is put object. So whenever somebody uses this bucket, uploads a file, we want this event to be triggered. Okay? And here it says any bucket. We don't want it for any bucket. We just want it for this one. I'm just going to copy this name, put it here, and here we go. So let's see. Yeah. Up here, you can see the actual event pattern is just a JSON document, and I'll make that a little larger. That's just a JSON document with the source, AWS S3, the detail, the event name being put object, and the bucket name, which is my bucket. And that's what we're looking for. Right? Cool. So, and if anything is unclear, please let me know. So I'm going to create this event. Oh, I'll select the bus. I will use the default event bus, and I want to enable the rule. And the next thing I can do here is define a target. And over here, as opposed to the S3 event notification that we looked at before, over here, you can use all kinds of targets, all kinds of destinations. You can use an API gateway. You can start a batch job. You can terminate an EC2 instance. You can start a glue workflow. You could also fire a Lambda function, or what we're looking at is start a step functions state machine. This is what we want to do. However, right now, we don't have that state machine. So I'm going to remove the target for now. I'm going to disable the rule. I'm just going to create the rule with, I wanted to create the rule without a target. That doesn't work. It needs at least one target. And we don't have a target yet. So what I'm going to do first is for this to be able to set this up. So we have the bucket, we have the event, we have the event rule, and what we still need is the step function state machine. So this needs to be done now. I'll go back and I'm going to open another tab with step functions. And in this tab, what I can do now is create just a quick step function. I'm gonna go here, click on Get Started. That would let me build a hello world example with all kinds of flows. I don't want to do that. I really just want to create, I want to leave this, just want to create a new state machine. I want to design my workflow visually. There are two types of state machines, one being standard, one being express. Express state machines are shorter. When you want, I think up to 5. I'm not entirely sure. These are short express state machines that run through really quickly, and standard state machines, they are durable, so they can run even a year long, up to a year, where you have steps and then you may have to wait for something and you may have approval steps and so forth, and the process can go up to a year. That's standard. In our case, I think we're fine with just using an express function. And if you're not sure, we have this help me decide down here, and you can see the maximum duration of a standard is up to 1 year. Express is up to 5 minutes. Standard is a little bit slower, or rather doesn't have such a high execution rate. You can execute over 2,000 per second, and with Express, you can execute over 100,000 per second. So you can really process a lot of things. The state transition rate is limited with standard. It's nearly unlimited with Express, and Express is less expensive than standard. So that is something to look at. What we're going to do now, because the process that I'm going to kick off with a file upload won't go more than 5 minutes, I hope. So I'm decide to use an express step function here. I click on next. And now you can see we are in the Workflow Designer. And this is really neat. Let's see, there's something in the chat. Okay, so the question is, here you must use the default bus since AWS service events, including CloudTrail, are not by default available for custom buses, isn't it? Right, exactly. That's exactly right. CloudTrail events are always put on the default bus. And in the past, if you've used AWS for longer, you might remember CloudTrail event rules. In the past, there was only the default bus, and we didn't have the service Amazon Event Bridge. That wasn't there yet. You could only do CloudTrail event rules. And these were, technically, this was the same thing. In the past, we only had the default bus. And now with Event Bridge, you can also create your own buses for applications when applications want to communicate with each other. So applications can put messages on their own application bus, and other applications can listen to that. But the CloudTrail events are always put on the default bus. That's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. So back to the Workflow Designer. As you can see here, this has become really neat. What you can really do here is just define a workflow. We have our starting point, we have our endpoint, and over here on the left, you can choose all kinds of things like Lambda functions or S3 things or database or anything, really anything. We have over 2,000 service over 2,000. I'm sorry. We have over 200 service integrations in step functions now. But what I want to do here, just to get the skeleton running, is use a placeholder. And this is where this pass state comes in. I'm just going to use that and put it here. And the pass state really, it does nothing except taking the input, and it on the other end, it comes out as the output. So my configuration over here, I'm going to call it, just going to call it placeholder. That's my placeholder. So state pass, next state, go to end. So, and that's it. We've got an input and we've got an output. Here we go. All right. So whenever this step function is being started, it goes into the placeholder and it immediately goes to the end. So We've got the definition. I'll go to next. This is the definition expressed in JSON. So that is really simple to read as well. So we have the state machine. This is my state machine. It starts at placeholder, and it has the following states. It has only one state. It has the placeholder of type pass, and the state holder. Once it's gone through the state holder, it will end, and that's it. So I'm going to go down, click on next. Oh, I missed something. Did I miss anything? Let me go back real quick. Express, next, placeholder, next, code snippet, next. Oh, that's an interesting error message. That's an interesting error message. While this happens, just real quick in the chat. With the announcement of event replay, Event Bridge can now record any events processed by any type of event bus. Replay stores these recorded events in archives. Oh, I missed that. Thank you so much. Let me have a look at that. Event Bridge, event replay. Look at that. It's November 6th. Nice. Thank you so much. I'm gonna post this in the chat. Thank you so much. That's a great piece of information. That passed me by. I didn't realize that. Cool. Thank you. Cool. So if you find anything that I can't know everything. So if there's anything that you disagree with, or you think, or like in this case, that something has changed, please let me know, because that's really interesting. You can choose to record all events or filter events to be archived by using the same event pattern, matching logic used in rules. That is an amazing functionality. That is really great, because that helps you replay events, and you don't have to do it by hand. Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. So back to this. I have an issue here. I'm going to cancel this real quick. Okay, an error occurred. Oh, I've been logged. The session expired. My session expired. So let me log in real quick. That's why it didn't work. I'll log in off stream real quick. Okay, let's reload this page. All right, here we go. So I was talking too much. I was talking too much, and the session expired. All right, so back to step functions. Let's click here, state machines, create state machine. I want to start an express state machine, go to next. The workflow, I'll just put a pass state here. I'll call that placeholder. Go to next, make that a little bit smaller. This is my state machine. Next. There we go. All right, now I'm going to give it a name, my process new file. Process new file, I'll just call it that. And the state machine, just like a Lambda function, just like everything in the AWS, needs permissions to do what it does. So anything in AWS or nothing in AWS has any permissions whatsoever, except you explicitly give permissions to it. So the state machine needs an execution role. And this execution role has a number of policies that allow the state machine to do certain things. What I'm going to do here is just create a new role for the state machine without any specific permissions. I'll turn on logging. I'll include execution data so that we're able to troubleshoot. And that's about it. You can see down here an execution role will create it with full permissions. So full permissions means all required permissions for the actions specified in the state machine will be auto-generated. because we haven't specified any actions, we only have a past state, a placeholder, there won't be too many permissions. Here's the state machine definition. And it's not including any policy templates because it doesn't need to do anything. Hey, Sean. Hey, good to see you. How are you? So it's not going to apply any permissions because we don't need any permissions, at least now. I'm going to create the state machine. Okay, so the service role has been created. A CloudWatch log group has been created. And it's in the process of creating the state machine. So let's wait a second, and I'm going to take a drink. Oh, 5:40 a.m. 5:40 a.m. You're in Arizona, right? Yeah, that's pretty early over there. It's 2:40 p.m. over here right now. Anyway, whoever's in the chat, please let me know where you are from. I'm really looking forward to get to meet people from all over the world. I know that here are people, someone's from the Philippines, someone's from the US. Just let me know in the chat where you are from. I'm in Germany. I'm based out of Hamburg in northern Germany, and the weather is getting terrible and cold these days. Okay, cool. So we've got our step function. And we've got our state machine, process new file. And with this one, we can go back to Event Bridge. Gonna reload this. And I'm gonna create this rule again. So the rule name is new file. I'll call it has been uploaded. Pubudu, you're in Amsterdam. Velisva, hey, good to see you. Hey, Velisva. Everyone say hi to Velisva. She's a colleague of mine. She's based out of South Africa. She basically does the same thing that I do, but she's in South Africa, so she takes care of everything Sub-Saharan Africa, and she's doing a lot of community work in Africa, which is really awesome. Thanks for joining, Velisva. Good to see you. Pubudu, you're in Amsterdam. Bruce, you're in Scotland. I'll try not to speak with a Scottish accent now because I'm totally gonna mess it up. Ujwal is here as well. Good to see you, Ujwal, from India. Okay, cool. And Kazukur is from Sydney. Kazukur, what time is it in Sydney right now? It must be pretty late. Awesome. People from all over the world, pretty much from everywhere, from Europe, from Africa, from Australia, from Asia, from the United States. We're only missing someone from South Africa now, I guess. Anyway, so I'm going to customize the event pattern predefined by service. I'll just run through that real quick again. AWS, the service name is, I'll just type it here, S3, event type, object level events, and I want specific operation put object. I want only to know if somebody puts an object into my bucket. Just got to reload that into this bucket. All right, into this bucket. So Kazukur, it's 11:40 p.m. right now. It's pretty late. Well, it's okay. That's 9 hours ahead of me. Nice, interesting. Okay, cool. So the default event bus and the target, in this case now, the target is going to be a step function state machine. And I'm going to choose the process new file, the one that I just created. And also, in this case, I need to give Event Bridge the permission to actually execute this step function. So as I said before, in AWS, there are no permissions. Nothing can do anything except you give it explicit permissions. So to execute the step function, the Event Bridge service needs the permission to actually execute that step function. So I'm going to create a new role for this specific resource, and I'm just going to click on Create. So here we go. You can see it's created successfully. I can close that. We have the event rule, new file has been uploaded, status is enabled. And now I'm going to go back to the drawing board. What do we have? We have the S3 bucket. Whenever a new file is written to the bucket, that triggers an event automatically in CloudTrail. That triggers an event that's been written to a log, but this event is being picked up by an event rule. And if the pattern of the event matches, it triggers a state machine. And step functions. And this event, the JSON document, will be handed over as an input in the step function. And now let's have a look if everything works. So if I did it correctly, if I upload a file, let me open my Finder real quick. Here we go. Let's say I'll create a new file up here. Or I'll just upload something. I'll just upload let's see. I'll just upload this file here. That's just a picture of this live stream. That is, let me see, that is, I'm just uploading, I'm going to show you. I'm just going to upload this picture here. This is what I'm going to upload. So here's the file, and I'm going to say upload. Now it's uploading the file. Here we go. So the file has been uploaded. It's in the bucket, and theoretically, if everything works as I wanted it to, so if I didn't forget anything, this should have triggered a step function's execution. Now let's have a look at that. This is my step function. This is the state machine. And let me see. Process new file. Let's have a look at the logs in CloudWatch. Right here, we actually have an execution. As you can see here, I'll do that as, no, okay. As you can see here, the execution started. The pass state has been entered. I'll make that bigger. You can see here, the execution has started. The pass state has been entered. The pass state has been exited, and the execution has succeeded. And if we look at it, you can see, and I'll scroll down a bit. This here is the input. And the input is the JSON representation of the event. It contains things like who did it, me. It contains information like what was the source IP address. It contains information like the actual event name, which was put object. And it contains all kinds of other information. Which bucket? This is the bucket that the object has been put to, the actual file name, which was livestream.png, and so forth. So this is the input to the step function. And the step function then can work with this input and process it. Hey, Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan, how are you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Cool. So everything works. The only thing that I'm missing here is, for some reason, I should be able to see the executions of this. I'll make that a little smaller. I'm a little confused because usually, maybe something has changed, because usually I should be able to see all the executions over here. Here's the definition. It's just using a placeholder. Here's my monitoring, so we can see the CloudWatch metrics, and the data is going to show up in a minute or two from the execution. Maybe that takes just a second until it shows up. But anyway, we saw in the CloudWatch logs, it worked. So all the plumbing works. Back to the drawing board. We've got our S3 bucket, sends an event. This event executes the state machine. And in this state machine, this could be a Lambda function. Or any other integration that we need. This could even be, and that makes step functions so interesting. This could even be, let's go to the definition. Let's go to the definition in the Workflow Studio. I could simply, I could simply say, oh, where's my mouse? Oh, my mouse battery is empty. Damn. Ooh, I need. That's when you use wireless stuff. Okay, here we go. Plugged it in. That's when you use wireless stuff. What we could do here really is, if we just want to store this event in a DynamoDB table, we could just go here and say DynamoDB and say put item, and I could just put a DynamoDB put item here, configure it, and it would automatically store this event into a DynamoDB table. And I don't even need a Lambda function for that. I can just use this integration. Question for Dennis. Is the S3 has to trigger via CloudTrail and not direct into Event Bridge seen as a pain point internally? The thing is, I don't know if it's seen as a pain point or not. I have no idea. I don't see it as a pain point. The thing is that we have two mechanisms of event integration with S3. The one being the legacy mechanism, or I call it legacy. I don't know if it's really legacy, but it has been around for quite some time, is the actual event notification mechanism in S3, which is this one. When I go to properties, and I go down here to the event notifications, I can directly invoke things from S3 without having to go through CloudTrail. And that's easy. That's really simple. If I create an event notification, I can just set it up. However, the only three possible destinations are Lambda functions, SNS topics, and SQS queues. So if I want to trigger a step function or anything else outside of these three services, it doesn't work with the event notification. However, it does work with the CloudTrail data event integration. And CloudTrail data events are the standard way nowadays, to integrate in AWS. So what we are doing internally is using the standard way, which is CloudTrail or Event Bridge, for integration, because that's what it's specifically been made for. And it may feel like a little bit of a you have to do a little bit more, but in fact, it's quite simple. Once you've set up the CloudTrail log for data events, you can just use it. So it's a one-time setup of the CloudTrail log. But on the other hand, you have the benefit of being able to use to trigger all kinds of services and not just Lambda functions, SQS queues, and SNS notifications. I hope that answers your question. As a pain point, as I said, I don't see it as a pain point. It's a one-time setup to get a data event up and running, and everything else is on Event Bridge. And I have one way of basically listening to events, no matter if it's S3 put object events or if it's application specific events or third-party service integration specific events. Everything uses the same pattern And I don't have to remember, well, here I need to use this pattern with event notifications, and there I need to use CloudTrail or EventBridge events and so forth. So that makes it, actually, it makes it simpler for me at least. All right. So, okay, I'm totally behind the EventBridge. I just want S3 events to appear on the default event bus. Yeah, and that's the thing. They do if you configure them in CloudTrail. But by default, CloudTrail doesn't do them because depending on your type of application and the amount of data that you store, there may be a ton. Imagine you have an application where people can download images, and you have millions and millions of downloads every day, and each of these would all be logged into your CloudTrail log. All of these would all be put on your CloudTrail event bus. That would pollute your logs and your event bus. There would be so many events on there, and so that would take it would just be a lot of work. It would be a lot of data to be stored and everything. It would cost money because the data needs to be stored somewhere. So by default, we don't activate data events, and data events include data events on S3, read and write events, but also Lambda function invocations, because Lambda function invocations can also be in the millions, depending on the type of application that you have. It could be millions a minute. And you don't necessarily want all of those on the event bus. But if you do want specific events on the event bus, you then can implement a listener. Like, say, you want to know if somebody reads from this specific bucket with a certain prefix. You want to be notified about that, and all the other reads in your public website bucket, for instance. You use something else for that. You use your web page and your web analysis tool, your clickstream analysis tool, or anything like that. You don't need all that on the event bus. Does that make sense? So it's the benefit of not having potentially millions of events per minute to process versus having to set up something explicitly. And the way to set it up, as I said, it's really simple in the console, and it's even simpler if you do it using infrastructure as code. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and set the same thing up. We've been here for an hour. I didn't really plan the time, but I only have one more hour before I need to go to a meeting. So I would say, what do you think about we use the next hour? If you can stick around. If you don't, you can always watch this after the fact, because I'm going to leave it on YouTube. Spend the next hour doing the thing that we did here, implementing it not via the console with point and click, but implemented using the CDK, the AWS CDK. What do you think? Does that make sense? And I can see there's something in the chat. Yeah, and that's a good point too. Also good to mention, CloudTrail data events are not covered by free tier, only management events. And that's that's a very important point, because CloudTrail, by default, CloudTrail is free. It doesn't cost you anything. CloudTrail logs all your events, logs all the API calls, produces the events, and then stores them in the event history, which is here. However, the event history doesn't contain data events. It only contains management events, as you said, Pubudu, and it's only stored for the last 90 days. So if you need to look into events that are older than 90 days, you would have to store them explicitly. Storing them explicitly would mean creating a CloudTrail trail that then stores them in an S3 bucket. And because you store them in an S3 bucket, you incur cost, because storage costs money. So it will cost something. And this is why we don't activate them by default, because by default, your AWS account is free. You don't have to pay anything except you want to. And this is why we say, all right, if you want to store them for more than 90 days, and if you will also want to utilize data events, then you will have to explicitly activate a trail. And this trail then can expose the data events and store the events for more than 90 days, basically indefinitely. And one of the things, just from a security perspective, that's really important here. If you have, especially if you run a production account, I would always turn on CloudTrail, because if it happens that there's a misconfiguration in your account, or you have a breach, you have a data breach or anything, you need to be able to get to the information what happened inside of your account. And one of the things, the IBM data breach report, time, see. IBM regularly does a data breach record. Discovery time. Here we go. In the 2019 cost of a data breach record, and we have those for later years as well, IBM has said that the average time to identify a breach in 2019 was 206 days. So that means 90 days are not enough on average. So if there's a breach, and you need to make sure to understand what happened, you should be able to go through all your logs, and especially for production accounts, you should always be able to see what happened. So this is why I always would recommend turning on CloudTrail. It's not very expensive. It's just a few cents for the storage that's needed. And you can look at the pricing page for the details, but it's really not much. And on the other hand, you have the benefit of always being able to see what happened in your account, even years back. And in addition, you're able to manage data events. Cool. Thanks for the point. Sean, you need to watch later. That's totally fine. That's totally fine. I'll leave it up on YouTube. And I'm going to close all of this real quick. I'm going to leave that page. I don't need the changes. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire up a Cloud9 instance. And Cloud9 is a cloud-based IDE for writing, running, and debugging code. I'm going to create a new environment. Just call it IDE. Except now I can say, okay, I want a new EC2 instance for this, because that's going to run on EC2. I want a new EC2 instance. I'm going to take a T2 micro, which is totally fine. And you can do that too, and it's even free tier eligible. I'm going to use Amazon Linux too, and I want that it shuts down after 1 hour of inactivity. I want it to automatically shut down. Network, I'm going to put it in my default network. No preferences here. Next step, got everything, and I'm going to create the environment. This is going to take a minute. And I'm going to open up another console window here while this runs up. And as you can see, if I go to EC2 instances, I hope I started it in the correct region, because I can't see any instances here. Huh. Here we go. All right. Just took a minute to show up. So right here, as you can see, it's automatically starting an EC2 instance, which hosts my IDE. And this is just going to take a minute or two. And until that's done, I'm going to take another sip of water, because I'm getting a hoarse voice. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And while that's firing up, let's recap real quick for those who joined after the fact. we have an S3 bucket. Whenever we have a file inside of the bucket, and you can see I'm still practicing drawing stuff on this board. Whenever we have a file, we get a CloudWatch event rule that then triggers a step function, and the step function right now does nothing. It just has a pass state. And that's it for now. And that's a very simple event-based application. This here is an, let me try that again. Oh, I can do this. I can do this. Ha! Look at that. So that is a very simple event-based application. Something happens, which triggers something else. And a lot of the integration on AWS can be done this way. And it doesn't matter if this is a new file in a bucket, or a new record in a database, or an API call, or whatever. Could be anything. And this here is the default way of integrating using EventBridge. And this can also be used not only for applications, it can also be used for operations. Let's say we have something. Let's say there's an event, like an EC2 instance breaks down. As you know, at scale, everything fails all the time, and you have got an EC2 instance which fails, and you need to make sure that something happens down the line. So an automation process, and that could be an event, like here we go, like the EC2 instance. We've got the EC2 instance. Once the EC2 instance fails, we've got the event, and the event triggers something. Or we have SecOps, security operations. Let's say somebody opens SSH on the firewall. We want this event to trigger a process that then, for instance, immediately closes the port on the firewall again, and maybe even removes the permissions from the role or the users who did that, and send a message to the security team to investigate. So basically, everything on AWS can be automated using this same pattern. And this, going back to what you said before, Jonathan, where you said you just want S3 events to appear on the default bus. Or not that one, but here. That's what I mean. Is the S3 has to trigger via CloudTrail, not directly into EventBridge. This is the thing. All of these things here, everything goes via CloudTrail. Everything that has to do with AWS API calls goes via CloudTrail into EventBridge. So you always have the same pattern. And that makes it so easy, no matter if you want to do application integration or operations automation or security operations. That helps you always doing the same thing. You don't have to learn too many different things. It's always the same way. So let me see. I'd be 10,000% interested in you doing the CDK work inside shrink-wrapped IAM permissions. My main concern with CDK right now is, if I remember correctly, how I as an ops can enable devs to use it safely without admin. Okay, that's a very good point, because let me clear that. And this is one of my favorite topics. Just a side note. I'm gonna go on that tangent real quick. But just as a side note for everyone, from a security perspective, you have certain amounts of threats. No matter, that's supposed to be an H, threats. No matter if you run on premises or in the cloud or anywhere else, you have a number of threats. You have a threat or what they call threat vectors. And we very often think of threat vectors like the network. Like people might attack via the network by because we have some ports open, because the firewall is not configured correctly, because we have something private in a public subnet, and so forth. That can be so many things. So the network is considered a threat, or let's threat vectors or threat surface. Then we have the application itself. Do we have proper authentication? Do we have a web application firewall? Do we make sure that people can't do SQL injection? Do we make sure that people can't reverse engineer our code and find issues and so forth? So that's the application itself. And then we have physical security. That's data center access. Who is allowed to go into the data center? How is it monitored? How is it protected? What happens? What happens, for instance, with hard drives when they're decommissioned? Will they just be sold on eBay, or will they be destroyed? And these are things that you need to take care of. And this is what we this is what we take care of at AWS. AWS does that. So we take care of the security of the cloud. We make sure that nobody gets access if they're not allowed to. We make sure that physical access. We make sure that all devices that are being decommissioned are being destroyed using highly secure industry standards and everything. Another security threat is people. Oh, that's supposed to be an O. People, social engineering, calling someone saying, "Hey, I'm from IT helpline. Can you? We have an issue here. Can you just give me your password real quick?" You shouldn't give them your password, or you get an email, a phishing campaign where somebody impersonates your bank and has a link and says you need to log into your bank account. Here's the link. Please log in here, and you click on that and you put in your credentials. This is this is the thing. What many people don't think of is the delivery pipeline. This is what many people don't think about. The software delivery pipeline is an attack vector. If somebody gets access to your delivery pipeline, if somebody is able to commit code into your GitHub repository that then triggers the delivery pipeline, and the delivery pipeline has too broad permissions, someone is able to deploy potentially insecure, potentially harmful code into your application. And especially if you use infrastructure as code, where you even define your infrastructure via code, and part of the infrastructure are the permissions, somebody might be able to gain more permissions by deploying the permissions, by just deploying a new user with admin privileges and a password, and then they can just log in as that user. So to make sure that this doesn't work, yeah, I can see. Thank you. Exactly, that's the point. CI/CD, that is an attack vector, and you really need to make sure, especially in a production environment, that nobody's able to deploy harmful infrastructure or application code into your environment. How do you make sure that that doesn't happen? By securing your delivery pipeline. And one of the ways to secure your delivery pipeline is by giving it only the permissions it needs. right? And this is the principle. Oh, the principle of least privilege. And the principle of least privilege states that any actor in a system, a user or another system, a piece of code, should only have the permissions it needs to do its work and not more. And my personal extension of that is, and it should have those permissions only at the time when it needs them. So you can even restrict it by time. And that's a nice thing with AWS IAM, with identity and access management. Cannot only you cannot only restrict what somebody or something can do, you can even define when they can do that. You can strip down permissions to time windows, to certain points in time, and so forth. So always apply the principle of least privilege. I'm not going to do that in this stream because this is a lot of work that needs to be done. And it would probably be educational for that purpose, but the purpose of that stream is not that right now. I'm going to try and make it secure in general, and I'm going to talk about security every now and then because security is job zero. It's the most important thing. It just needs to be secure, but I'm not going to implement a highly secure pipeline. What I'm going to do is implement secure code with the pipeline. But thanks for pointing it out, Jonathan. It is a very important point. Your delivery pipeline, your deployment process should not be allowed to do anything beyond what it needs to do to make sure that nobody escalates their privileges through the pipeline. Because if anybody's able to deploy through the pipeline, they technically, effectively have the permissions that the pipeline has, even though the person itself may not have the permissions. If I only have the permissions to commit to GitHub and not do anything in AWS, but GitHub or my pipeline uses GitHub to then do something, I effectively have all the permissions that the deployment pipeline has. Good point. Thank you. Oh, and one thing, just as a side note, one thing that's really important here, how you can make sure that that works, because if you use CDK, the cloud or any kind of infrastructure as code, no matter any kind, right. If you use infrastructure as code, you will have multiple pipelines. You will have one pipeline that does basic security, like IAM permissions and so forth. This pipeline is very permissive because it needs to deploy permissions. But this pipeline should be highly protected, and only a small team or a few people, the platform team, the security team, should be able to use that. Sec only. And then you maybe have up here, the next layer, you have the basic infrastructure. Infra. That's network, VPN access, direct connection, things like that. And this is quite permissive as well, because that sets firewall rules, that sets up VPN connections, and so forth. So this needs to be very protected as well. And then that's platform. And in larger organizations, that's often managed by a platform team. And then you have, on top, you have application. That will be baseline application infra, like the database, the queues, and so forth, things that you need and that have a longer life cycle than your deployment. And on top of that, you have the actual application code. That could be 2 or even more different pipelines again, and they are used by the developer teams. In large organizations, these are separate teams. In smaller organizations, very often, these are the same people wearing different hats, having different roles. But the thing is to really think about it, to make sure that you don't deploy everything in the same pipeline, because then the pipeline needs a lot of permissions, and whoever is able to deploy to the pipeline, through the pipeline, can deploy everything. And that shouldn't happen. So that was a pretty long tangent. Thanks for the question. I hope I was able to answer it, and I hope it was understandable. Okay, cool. And now my Cloud 9 environment is up and running. I'm just gonna close that and close that. Here we go. That's just an IDE, an integrated development environment in the cloud. And I've got a Linux. It's a Linux environment. It's an Amazon Linux too. So I've got a Linux here. What I'm going to do now is I will create a new CDK application. And to do that, I'm going to create a new directory. And I'm going to call it my app. And I'm going to cd into my app. And in here, what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to make that a little larger. No, it doesn't work. Oh, I made it smaller. I want you to make it larger. I made it smaller. Damn. Here we go. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do here really is I need to install CDK first. I'm going to pull up the documentation. It started with the AWS CDK. And down here, prerequisites, down here, install the AWS CDK. Here we go. And we'll just say npm install g AWS CDK. npm install g AWS CDK. So file already exists. So it is already installed in my environment. So I'm let's say CDK version. Yeah, so it's already there. It's version 1.128. However, the node version on this machine is 17.01, and the CDK hasn't been tested with that yet. It has been tested with 16.3.0. So what I can do now is just install the correct node version, and I'm going to do that real quick. So let's say install different node version. Yeah, I agree. Let's see. Yeah, so I just say nvm install and then the version number. So here, nvm install and the version. Oh, I should have looked at it. Let's see, 16.3.0. So nvm install 16.3.0. Okay, now I'm going to say no nvm use 16.3.0, but I think it's automatically doing that anyway. So now using node v16.3. So if I run cdk -- version again, I shouldn't get that message anymore. Oh, because yeah. I'm using a different version. Reinstall that. Okay, now let's do that again. CDK version. Let me do that. npm uninstall AWS CDK. Is it uninstall or remove? Yeah, it's uninstall. And now I'm gonna npm install AWS CDK just to make sure everything's clean. All right, here we go. Now let's say CDK. I messed it up. I messed it up. Sudo npm install. Npm install -g AWS CDK. Yeah, I missed the G. Yeah, I didn't install it globally. Okay, so now let's say CDK version. Here we go. Okay, it's 1.129, but we don't have that error message anymore. All right, what I'm gonna do now is just simply say CDK init. I'm gonna use the app template, and I'm gonna use the language Python. So now it set everything up, and it has created a virtual environment. You can see here, now we have my app. And I'm not going to go into the details. This is a lot of details. What I want to show you and what I want to do here really is get going with some code. To do that, because I'm using Python, I'm gonna go into the virtual environment. So I'm going to say source env bin activate, and CDK has set that all up for me. So now I'm in the virtual environment. I'm going to clear that. And when I open up my app stack, this here, let me make that larger. I hope you can see that. This here is my application. It's my app stack. And the code that defines my stack goes here. Now let's have a look. What did we want to do? We have a, we want an S3 bucket. We need a CloudTrail to be able to catch the events. We need an event rule. And we need the state machine. That's what we need. Let's start with a bucket. And to do that, I'll simply say over here, bucket equals, now what? Let's have a look at the documentation. Let's go to CDK Python reference. And in here, we've got all the way down there, AWS CDK, AWS S3. Let's go to the package overview. I'll make that real large. To define an unencrypted S3 bucket, we simply say bucket equals S3 bucket and put something in there. Now let's do that. We say bucket S3 bucket self my bucket. All right. Now where does this S3 comes from? This comes from an import. So we need to import AWS CDK, AWS S3 as S3. Here we go. We're going to import this. And then we can simply say s3.bucket self my bucket. And that is everything we need to create a bucket using the AWS CDK. I'm just going to remove this here. Not going to use it. So that's all we need to create a bucket. Let's have a look. Let's say CDK. Oh, let's clear that real quick. Say CDK diff. Because with CDK diff, it shows us what it's going to do. Right. We don't have a module named AWS CDK. We need to import it first. To import it, we can simply say pip install AWS CDK. We could do that, but what I'm going to do from the beginning is actually add it to the dependencies of my application. The way to do that is the requirements text. So I'm just going to put here AWS CDK. Let me see. AWS CDK.core. That's what we need. There we go. I think that's it. And now I can say pip install -r requirements text, this file. Let's see if that works. Oh, I should be able to type pip install. So now it's installing this dependency. And now I can go back here and say CDK diff. There we go. So I didn't save that. I have to save the file. So now again. Oh, we have an error. We have invalid syntax. What's invalid here? What am I missing? Okay, I'm missing something here. Just real quick. AWS CDK Python import package. Just real quick. I'm probably really just missing something stupid. Import AWS CDK, AWS S3. That should be it, shouldn't it? What am I missing? As I said, I'm doing something wrong. Python import statement. I'm sure I'm missing something totally stupid right now. No, I don't want to get matched. Oh. If anybody can help me out real quick, my app stack. I'm stuck. I'm missing something. I don't want on a random site click all kinds of buttons. Import multiple packages. Here we go. From import. Oh, that's yeah, that's what I'm doing wrong. I'm using from AWS CDK, import AWS S3 S3. Okay, now maybe because I haven't, I need to add AWS CDK dot AWS S3. Pip install requirements. Yeah, so now I'm installing S3. Now let's try again. Yeah, here we go. I didn't import it. I didn't install the dependency. I needed the dependency. That was the issue. All right. Okay, cool. So what we have here, if you look down here, and I make that a little bit larger. Here we go. If you look down here, this is some metadata that the stack's going to deploy. We don't need to care about that, but we're creating a new resource. And it's a resource of type S3 bucket with the logical name my bucket, or with the name my bucket and this one. Let's have a look at the CloudFormation template that this is producing. Here we go. So we don't need to look at the metadata. This is just stuff. This is the resource. I've got a bucket called my bucket and some random string. And of type bucket, update, replace policy retain, deletion policy retain, and some metadata. And that's it. That's all we need to deploy a bucket. I'm going to the S3 console. As you can see, we've got my old bucket here, my files, the one that we created manually and some stuff. And what I'm going to do now is just say cdk deploy. Okay, so create in progress. And this is CloudFormation messages. So CloudFormation is the internal infrastructure as code stack on AWS. And this is going through CloudFormation. Now it's creating a bucket. And once that's done, once that's done, everything is done. So here we go. Now, if I reload my buckets, you should see a new one. And this is it. And it's been automatically named my app stack, because I called it my app, very creative, my bucket with a random string and another random string. This is my actual bucket. This is the bucket that CDK now created. And this is a default bucket. It has nothing set up. There are a few things that I would like to set up first. So the first thing that I would like to set up is, let's see. I want to block public access. I want to encrypt using SSE.S3. That's what I want to do. So these two things, let's start with public access. And what I can do really is just give it more information. Let's go to Python CDK reference. Let's go back here to the S3 reference. So the bucket has a block public access parameter. So now I can say block public access equals S3 dot block public access dot all. Block all. It's block all. I don't want anyone to be able to set this bucket to public. Gonna save. Let's say cdk diff. Let's have a look at the difference. So you can see down here, it added a public access block configuration. If we look at the bucket right now, oh, my session has expired again. Let me go there real quick. Just 1 second. I'm doing that off stream. Okay, here we go. So I'm logged back in. If I look at this bucket, at the properties of this bucket, you can see, under permissions, you can see block all public access is off. So people technically can open it up to the world. I don't want that. I want to block it. So I'm going to run CDK deploy. And once that has run, this should change. All this should become green, making it more secure. And that's what I mean when I say I'm going to set up things in a secure way. My CDK right now has admin permissions. In practice, especially in a production environment, I wouldn't do that. But yet, right now, for demo purposes, I'm going to do that. But the resources that I'm going to set up using security guidelines and best practices. So this has been set up. Now let's reload this page. And as you can see, block all public access has been turned on. And the next thing here is right now, we don't have any default encryption. I want to turn that on. So we've got block public access. That's been done. And the next thing that I'm going to do is encryption. Go back in the documentation. We have encryption. Let's use that. Yeah. Here we go. So let's use encryption equals, and for that we can use an instance of type bucket encryption. So here we go. Let's say bucket encryption dot, and we want S3 managed. I don't want to manage my own key here, but I want to make sure the data is encrypted at rest. So now it's S3 managed. Let's see, CDK diff. Oh yeah, I need to say S3 dot bucket encryption. Here we go. So it's changing the bucket configuration. It's adding bucket encryption. And if I deploy this, and bear with me, I'm not going to deploy in the future. I'm not going to deploy every tiny step. I'm just going through it now step by step. But after that, I'm going to make a little larger steps. So the upgrade is in progress. And once it's done, this should have turned to standard encryption. Yep, it's updating the bucket now, and it's done. Now let's reload. And as you can see here, default encryption now is enabled, and we're using Amazon S3 master key. So we're using SSE-S3, server-side encryption managed by S3. Cool. Now we do have a bucket to upload our objects to. And let's go back to the whiteboard or the blackboard. So we have the bucket, S3. Okay, this is a question. You named your bucket my bucket, but CDK did a bunch of namespacing to the underlying name. Is that unavoidable? Yes and no, and I'm not sure. That's my answer. Let me see real quick. The bucket name consists of a few things. Looking at the bucket name. By default, CDK adds the stack name, which in this case is my app stack because I named my app my app. Then it uses the bucket name. It uses an identifier inside of this is specific to CDK, a random string that CDK applied to create a logical ID for CDK. And this is a random string that CloudFormation applied to make sure it's unique, because CloudFormation doesn't know that it already has some stuff applied. So by default, if you deploy a bucket through CloudFormation, CloudFormation will add this random string to the end. By default, CDK, if you create new resources, CDK will add this random string to the end, and it will also always namespace it the logical ID plus the stack name. I believe this can be configured. I've never done it before, so I can't say for sure. Okay. But the thing really is, in many cases, you want unique names, and this definitely makes sure that it's unique. Good question, Robert. Nice to see you, Robert. First of all, congratulations to your, what was it, professional certification? You just passed your Solutions Architect Professional, which is amazing. I did that a couple of years ago, and it's really hard. Congratulations to that. Thanks for joining. And all the resources will be added to the same CloudFormation template. Yes. If I use the same stack, this is my stack. And all resources in this stack will be deployed to the same CloudFormation template. I could create an additional stack. Let me take a step back. CDK basically consists of 3 layers. We have the app. Oh, we have the app. We have inside of the app, we have one or more stacks. And inside of a stack, we use one or more constructs. And a stack that's used inside of the app can be defined inside the app, or it can be imported from outside the app. So you can reuse stacks in different apps, and you can reuse constructs in different stacks. So what we have here is, down here we have the app. This is my app. This is the entry point into the CDK application. This is the entry point. And inside of this app, I use my app stack. I could, and this is here. This is the one we just looked at up here. I could also define a second, third, fourth stack and could use it inside of my app. I could even import a stack from somewhere else and use it inside of my app. And these stacks are represented by their individual CloudFormation files. And inside of the stack, I use constructs. This is a construct. And you can even build your own constructs that you then use inside of your stack. So you have all the power of a programming language where you can abstract and create things, reuse things, and so forth. And this is basically how it's set up. Let me see, Jonathan. I get why the global uniqueness is important and why both tools try to help, but in an org where folks feel like they own a bucket, moving them to not caring about the name can be interesting. Yes, and as I said, I believe it's configurable, but since I've never done it before, I'm not entirely sure. We can have a look at the documentation real quick. Let's see, AWS CDK rename default resource names. Identifiers. Okay, there's a stack resource renamer. And I would assume there are similar constructs for other things where you can define, you can maybe define a default namespace that is specific to your organization, where you create default namespaces that are then used by the stacks. I'm not, as I said, I'm not entirely sure. I've never done that before, but that is certainly something for you to look into. I'm pretty confident that you can configure it. It is convention over configuration. However, you should be able to configure it yourself. All good, all good. It was just a slight tangent. I've got another 10 minutes, but I've got to finish up by then. So what I'm going to do now, we've set up the S3 bucket. And what I'm going to do next is just set the cloud trail real quick. The cloud trail. So that in the next episode, we can start hooking things together, putting things together. Okay. I'm going to close this and this. And what I need here for CloudTrail, I need the AWS CDK dot AWS CloudTrail package. Save it and install requirements. So I'm going to install the CloudTrail dependency. And up here, I'm going to pull the AWS CloudTrail dependency as. And to set up my trail, I'm going to call it CloudTrail equals. Now, let's see. What do you think? Most likely, it's going to be something like trail self my trail. And there's something important here. We've that's specific to CDK. Every stack and every construct inside the stack needs to be added to a scope. So for the construct to be created as part of this stack, the construct needs to take the stack as scope. And you can even see, if I go back to the app, even the app sends itself as a scope to the stack. The stack takes the scope, so the stack knows it's part of the app. No, that I'm sorry. This is it inherits from stack. The stack takes the scope here. Takes the scope. It takes the app as a scope, but it hands itself, the stack hands itself as a scope to its constructs. So all the constructs know they are part of this stack. Does that make sense? And then the second thing always is a name. And you can use whatever you want here, but this is being used to create logical IDs and to create the actual resource identifiers. So for the trail, we need some configuration. Now let's go here and have a look at CloudTrail, at the CloudTrail documentation. CloudTrail. Here we go. Package overview. I always first look at this. So here we go. And automatically generated with blah. No, that's disregard. This is just commentary. A trail, we call CloudTrail self CloudTrail. Now, this would be enough. So if I save that and simply say CDK diff, we've got an error because what's the thing? Oh, I missed a comma here. So, all right. CloudTrail referenced before assignment. Yeah, I can't reuse that. I'm just gonna call that trail. Here we go. So what we can see here, it's going to create a new CloudTrail. It's also going to create a bucket for the trail. This is going to be an S3 bucket for the trail to store its log into. And it's also creating a bucket policy for this bucket so that the trail can put its log files into the new bucket. Up here, you can see we'll have a number of IAM statement changes, and these are explicitly noted so that I'm aware of the fact that permissions are being changed. And in this case, that means we're adding permissions, allow get bucket ACL and allow put object to CloudTrail. So CloudTrail gets the permission to do these two things on my S3 bucket, on this one. So this is automatically setting up everything that CloudTrail needs to be able to store the logs into the bucket. I don't have to do that manually. This construct does that. However, I could also, if I wanted to store it in a bucket that already exists, I could also say, here, I give it a bucket. I could say bucket, oh, wrong button. I pressed the wrong button. I could say bucket equals, and then some bucket. But if I don't do that, by default, it will create a new bucket. And I want it to do that. However, I don't want it to, let me see. Looking at the time, I won't be able to do that because I really have to wrap up in a couple of minutes. I'm going to build that now. I'm going to deploy this as it is. And in the next episode, I'm going to change that trail so that it only logs data events from our bucket, from this one. Okay? So I'm going to deploy this now, CDK deploy. And because I change permissions, it's going to explicitly ask me if I want to do that. I do. And now looking at CloudTrail, it should, it's creating the new bucket right now. It needs the bucket. There's a dependency. It needs to create the bucket first to be able to create the trail. And once that's done, once the bucket has been created, it should create the trail. Here we go. So it's in the process of creating the trail. I'm going to reload this. And as you can see, we've got a new trail here. My app stack, my trail, and we've got the same name convention here. We've got the stack name, we've got the resource name, including the random number from CDK here, and the random number from CloudFormation here. That's the same name. That's the new trail, and this new trail stores its data into this bucket, which also has been newly created. And that's it. So what have we here? Just real quick, what have we done? We have a bucket. We have a CloudTrail, which stores its logs into another bucket. And next time, we're going to set up that CloudTrail only logs what happens inside this bucket and stores them here, so that then we can come from EventBridge and monitor these events. And that's what we're going to do. And this here is all we need to set up these two parts. Just a bucket with some configuration and a trail with some configuration. It's been deployed. Everything's done. Thank you for watching. It's been fun. It's been a nice 2 hours. It's been interesting. We just started. As I said, I'm pretty busy at this time, so I'm probably not going to be able to stream at a very regular time. But I'm going to make sure to post my streaming dates on Twitter. You can find me at dtraub on Twitter. I'm going to post them on LinkedIn and, of course, here on YouTube. So if you subscribe to this channel, if you turn on the notification, you will know whenever I set up a new stream. If you don't get a chance to join the stream, I will always leave them up so that you can, so that you're able to watch them after the fact. at your convenience, at your time. I can see this is a friend of mine. He's a fellow streamer here from Germany. Thanks for joining, Bundel. We're in the middle of wrapping up. If you like this video, please comment the video, let me know, interact with me. This is helpful for me. It's helpful for the YouTube algorithm to make sure that all other people see it as well. Thanks for joining. I will see you next time. Take care. Goodbye.